Hello to everybody, my name is Stefano and welcome to this episode of the Think and Analyze podcast. Today we have this title, Conscious Unconsciousness slash Interested Disinterest. You might not understand what it does, what it means right now, but during this episode, hopefully I will able to explain it correctly so that you understand what I mean. Before we begin, I just want to say that these things apply to me, but I honestly don't know if they'll work for you. In other words, usually I make rather abstract videos. I talk about abstract topics, rather logic things that do not really concern people or how you are as a person. But this time there might be some sort of references to how you are as a person, and so it's not sort of abstract as I usually make videos. With that said, something I noticed, which has led me to do this episode, is that when I care less about something, it tends not to give me problems. When I care more, instead, it tends to give me problems. So, what is the relation between me caring about something and that something giving me problems? And with problems, I mean like I'm not able to do that thing as I would like to do. I would say that there is one fundamental aspect. When I care less, I don't tense up. I don't try to control everything. So I end up almost letting the thing work for itself, we could say. When I care more, I try to control everything, and this messes everything up. So here are my thoughts. To do anything, I need to have a conscious unconsciousness. Let's start by saying that things, in order to be done, need consistency most of the time. But to be consistent, you almost need to be disinterested in or unaware of what you are doing. In the sense that doing something with a certain disinterest leads to being relaxed, which leads to going with the flow, and I guess that makes everything fluent and easier. You find way less difficulties. Why? Because if you are not skilled enough to do something and you try to control everything about it as if you were a professional, you end up overloading your mind with too many things. Your mind won't be able to handle that. Instead, being relaxed simply doesn't lead to an overloading, and so you surely end up doing what you want to do better. This is something I noticed some weeks ago while I was playing tennis. I'm now going to tell you a brief story, and I want you to pay attention to the moments I was relaxed or not. So, I've been playing tennis for 10 plus years now at an amateur level. For the first 7 years, I would say, that was the only type of physical activity I would engage in. But after those 7 years, I also started to do some strength training at home. I basically did a mixture of both. In my head, I simply wanted to get a bit stronger and bigger. I did not plan anything else. But after some time, I realized that the power of my strokes in tennis had significantly increased, especially the serve. I began serving with crazy speed. My technique was not the best, but certainly the power was there. I didn't really know what I was doing, I just hit the ball as hard as I could. With time, I started to pay more and more attention to my serve. I, one, realized that serving without a solid technique would likely lead to an injury, and two, I wanted to make it a lethal weapon, basically. By the way, if you don't know, the serve in tennis is a fundamental skill. While some other types of shots can be trained less if you have a specific style of play, like the volley, if you like to play from the base, volleys aren't really your top priority. The serve is always needed to start the rally. I mean, you can do an underarm serve, but usually it's not very effective. I watched many videos about it and I actually improved it a lot. But after some months, I seemingly got stuck and it almost got worse. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, I had started, let's say, at 3. By watching videos, I reached a 6.5, but then I suddenly went back to 5.5 and gradually to even 4.5, and I stayed there for a while. This process happened during 3 years, more or less, but I hit that plateau after a little less than 2 years. It's also important to say that I didn't play regularly and seriously, like twice a week during this time. For several reasons, I might have played like for 4 months regularly, then stopped for 1.5 months, then uh, started again. So it was not very consistent. However, what I did stay consistent with was my strength training. As a matter of fact, during this 3 year period, I gained a lot of strength with calisthenics moves, basically bodyweight training. So after all this time, we reached the recent past. The plateau was still there, and I got to a point where I was thinking to myself, when I began my strength training, I was serving so powerfully. Now I'm even stronger and I can't even serve at that pace. As a matter of fact, when I said that my serve went from a 5.5 to a 4.5, it was because my technique went gradually off. So I was forced to serve even slower in order to ensure my ball bounced in the right spot, even though it still wasn't happening with the frequency I wanted. Then recently, while I was serving, my trainer told me to relax. He said my right arm, which I used to serve, was too tight, and that was the main reason I couldn't serve properly. He said that having a tense arm right at the beginning of the movement didn't allow me to express my explosive power when hitting. I had to relax, and then, when I was about to hit, I had to voluntarily hit the ball with power. I did what he told me to do, and he was in fact right, because I did some very powerful serves. So you saw what happened. I mean, that is the end of the story. So now you should see what happened. When I started my strength training, I was almost unaware of my increased performance, so my serve improved. Then I watched videos about it, and the serve improved even more, but just for a brief period of time. It got worse again, and then, as my trainer suggested to relax, it improved again. That is why I'm saying that how relaxed you are when doing something is related to how well you perform. As a matter of fact, something key I purposely did not point out was the reason why my serve got worse after it had improved. Basically, that happened because in order to improve it, I ended up watching too many videos. I wanted to handle too many things at once. So initially it improved because I had not watched many videos yet. But after that, instead, instead of making the things I just learned solid and part of me, I kept watching, gaining theoretical knowledge. So I stuffed my mind with too many things. I was dealing with an information overload, basically. On top of that, after my mind was already fatigued with things and my serve started giving me problems, I tried even harder to control everything. It was a downward spiral, and I reached the point of not being able to match my previous performances. So again, that's why relax matters. But you can't relax enough by telling yourself to relax when deep down you know you are tense. Normally, if you are actually relaxed, you don't notice too much. You don't notice it too much. So telling yourself to relax implies that you believe you need to relax, which in turn implies that you believe you are tense. That's why you need a conscious unconsciousness. You need unconsciousness so that you are not overloading your mind with awareness. But this unconsciousness needs to be conscious, in the sense that you should still be aware and believe that this is something useful with a purpose. Otherwise, you are just completely unaware of what happens. And a total unawareness never leads to controlled improvement. But you could ask, okay, but if I tell myself I need to be unconscious, doesn't that imply that I believe I am not? And so, isn't that the same thing as before? At first glance, you might say yes. On second glance, no. Why is that? Because the moment you tell yourself you need to be unconscious, you enter the realm of consciousness. So you are not actually becoming unconscious. You need to be unconscious. You need to purposely free your mind from everything. I'm aware this might not make sense to you at first, but to make an analogy, I would say that what I'm saying is the same process as meditation. I don't meditate, But for what I understood, it requires to empty your mind or to focus on things that are natural, like breathing, um, without focusing on being conscious, on trying to control yourself. Another expression, which might help to explain everything better, is that you need an interested disinterest. You need a disinterest so that you are able to let go and not be too caught up in the activity. But this disinterest needs to be interested, as in, you know that a disinterest is the best thing to improve in or do the activity. So perhaps it should all make sense now. Well, maybe not totally. There's still something I want to say, which I believe is very important. You might say, I get what you are saying, but are you then implying that pros, let's say professional tennis players, really are that unaware? Are you telling me that Nadal or Federer simply go with the flow? They must be exceptional talents then, if they were able to reach their top performance without putting in a conscious effort. Now, if you thought something like this, your question is 100% legitimate. So now we enter a realm of hypothesis. As I discussed in the previous episode, if I told you to do what I'm saying in order to reach Nadal or Federer's level, even though I don't have any experience, I would be incoherent. That's why I'm stressing that the following is an hypothesis. To be exact, it is an hypothesis when we talk about Federer or Nadal, but it is almost a fact when I'm referring to myself. I mean, for me personally, I find that what I'm about to say has been up to this point correct. So, with that said, how could one improve? After what I explained, it seems that improvement is something that comes out of nowhere. Well, actually, I would say that to improve, you need to work at one thing at a time, leaving all the other things as they are. So, for example, if in tennis I want to improve my serve, I'm not going to watch 10 videos about it trying to change everything. Instead, I'm going to focus on one aspect, let's say the toss of the ball, and I'm going to fix it. Is it too in front of me, to the left, two to the left? Once I understand this and I have practiced enough so that it is something I do effortlessly, I'm going to choose something else like the swing and I'm going to practice it until it becomes natural. So you see, if you direct your conscious effort into one thing at a time, you should be able to improve where you want. But again, if you try to change everything, it's not going to work. The conscious effort needs to be directed solely on one thing. The others will be left as they are. In this way, you will be doing 90% of the work without problems because everything just comes naturally, while the remaining 10% will be a conscious effort, but you surely are capable of handling that. So up to this point, I have explained several things, but the most interesting part is, in my opinion, the following. If you still don't know by now, I like to think. In another episode, in which I discussed the theme of overthinking, I explained how I consider my tendency to think a lot something rather positive, namely an increased ability in rational thinking. With that also comes my tendency to be very aware of what I do and happens around me. Now, I'm not saying I'm the most aware person of the world or I'm the most intelligent person at all on the world. That is not the case at all. But I tend to believe that because there were some things that happened in my life that made me quite believe that, made me quite realize that perhaps that is the case. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm almost sure. Now, before I realized that perhaps it's better for me to focus on one thing at a time, I kept wondering, how is it possible that with this, let's call it increased consciousness I have, I seem not to be able to improve rapidly? I applied this question to a number of aspects in my life, but let's focus on tennis to keep it simple. Specifically for tennis, so I was basically asking myself, how is it possible that I am aware of how I move during my serve, but I still seem not to be able to improve on it? It almost seems like it would be better to know nothing. It would be better not to be aware of everything at all. This doubt stemmed from the fact that people I played tennis with, who were better, in my opinion, than me, knew less theoretical things than me. I know this because I would ask them things like, "How do you do this? How do you that? Do you that? Um, how to the left do you toss the ball?" Those kind of things. And I often would receive answers like, "I just do it how it feels natural." So at that point, I was almost starting to believe that more consciousness implied less efficiency and less ability. But then, once I understood that it is instead better to focus on one thing at a time, I realized how much potential I have. This is not to brag at all, but think about it. If I'm aware of so many things, I can more rapidly identify what's wrong and change it. Of course, it's not always like that. As you saw before, I was never aware that I was too tense while serving. But the potential is certainly more than someone who goes with the flow. This comes with a burden, however. I'll always need to consciously put in the effort. I'll always need to stuff my mind with new information if I want to improve. In other words, if I can't do things by going with the flow, I may have to purposely learn many things in order to improve, we could say, artificially. I might have to force the improvement, not allowing it to happen randomly or naturally, which is something that might not even happen, or it might happen in a very long period of time. That is certainly not an easy task, but it also implies something positive. I'll always learn new things. At this point, I'm used to learning things whenever I need to, so that keeps my mind fresh and open. And I honestly believe that's something pretty healthy in the long term. There's another benefit of an increased awareness. If something is giving me problems, I'll probably have no difficulties in dealing with it. Instead, someone who goes with the flow too much might not be able to do that. As a matter of fact, if someone is good, for example, at playing tennis, and for some reason they start to have problems in an area, they are likely to be quite confused about it because they might have never had to consciously work to improve. And at that point, they might get stuck for mental reason. That is, they might start to believe they have some kind of problem, and by doing that, the problem will be created. They will start to tense up. They will enter consciousness. They might be able to overcome the situation in two ways, either randomly, in the sense that the problem kind of fixes itself, or consciously, as in they might start to pay more attention to themselves and realize what's wrong. However, the burden of awareness might be too much for them to handle, and they might go back to being less aware, or they might be able to keep up and actually improve step by step. Now, I might sound a little exaggerated, but I genuinely believe that awareness is not something easy to handle. And I don't even have objectively that much knowledge about the world and its issues to be like to have this kind of great burden on my shoulders of awareness. But especially if you suddenly become aware of so many things at once, that is going to be a little tough, perhaps, at least in the short term or short or medium term. If we generalize this process, we might compare it to a fall of a system belief, of a belief system. Of course, the latter is likely to be way worse, but the mechanism is the same. You suddenly realize that there are many more possibilities and you can't just unsee that. It's almost as if I tell you, as a listener, that you in this moment are breathing. Although that is something you always do, at that moment you likely became aware of it and you suddenly started to control it, and you likely felt a little uncoordinated. Just imagine this happening with something that is much more complex. Now, at this moment, I feel I'm talking as if I imply that I have a lot of experience and knowledge, as if I imply that I'm saying a truth that few people have access to. This is not the case at all. So I wanted to point out that because if I'd listened to myself saying these things without pointing out the fact that I don't have that much experience, I would perceive myself as a bit superb. So again, that is not the case. I do not believe I'm saying a truth. I just believe that I'm saying something that might be correct. Finally, something I want to say is this. I feel that if someone realizes, for whatever reason, that they were doing a number of different things unconsciously, and they start to dive deeper into that and into other parts of their life, so they basically avoid going back to unconsciousness, at a certain point they might pass what I would call the point of no return. Namely, they won't be able to unsee the complexity of everything they do. This might be a heavy weight to handle, but as I said, once you realize that, I also believe there is room for a massive improvement. And I also believe that an increased consciousness is needed to reach high performances. To use the previous example, I believe that Nadal or Federer are able to do what they do because they were able to bring to consciousness all the complexity of the sport. And by doing that, they were able to purposely improve in everything, like in a pragmatic, mechanical, and efficient way. I genuinely believe that it is very hard to reach their level without a certain level of awareness, not only in the strict area of tennis, but in life generally. I genuinely believe that it is hard to be such a high performance person without an awareness of everything. You can't just have awareness on the thing that you are so good at. I genuinely believe that you must have an increased awareness on everything. So that is it for today's episode. Maybe it was a bit short. I don't know. It kind of felt a brief episode, but I hope that I told you something interesting. I hope that you understood. I hope that I explained, and so that you understood what the title means, and I hope that it might help you in the future. Personally, mm, when I realized that I need to be sort of consciously unconscious during while I play tennis and while I do a number of different things. That was kind of interesting. I still need to improve on that aspect, and I still can't like switch to unconscious mode. Let's say if I need to do something, but I'm working towards it, and I honestly um, I am already seeing the benefit of what I'm saying. So hopefully that is the same for you as well. With that said, see you guys.